In today's video, we're going to go through the 5 areas that increase the most in terms of average sold price year over year in the city of Toronto. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. As always, you can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, my office information, and my TikTok. Feel free to get in touch with me with any questions you may have with regards to topics covered in this video, topics covered in previous videos, or any general inquiries with regards to the Toronto/GTA real estate market whatsoever. Lastly, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. That would be much appreciated. And you can find the link to my newsletter in the description box. Enough of that. Let's get to the point of today's video, which is the 5 areas that increase the most in a year over year perspective, according to average sold prices. So we're going to compare, just to be clear, January of 2021 versus January of 2022. Of course, right now we are about 5 full days into February, and I'll have plenty of videos on February numbers coming out soon. But I thought it would be a good idea to do a year over year analysis for areas within the city of Toronto. A couple of points here. First and foremost, we're going to be defining the areas based upon the TREB codes / TREB boundaries. So I might say see this, see that, C2, C3. If you don't know what these numbers and letters refer to, you can always find the TREB maps in the description box, a link to which is there, and you can use the interactive mode to see which parts of the city the codes designate. Secondly, we're going to go based on average sold prices, not median sold prices. Third, this is only within central Toronto. We're going to touch on western and eastern Toronto in future videos for sure, but for this video, it's only in central Toronto. And number 4, we're going to be looking at condominium apartments only, so excluding condominium townhomes. Just condominium apartments and lofts, but not accounting for condominium townhomes, because although they're technically condominiums, they really do throw off the prices when included with condominium apartments. Starting out, number 5, the 5th area that increased the most within the city of Toronto with regards to average sold prices according to the Toronto Condo Market, C6, going from an average sold price of $536,000 in a year to $648,000. This represented a 20.79% increase in average sold prices year over year. Now, the thing about C6, which once again you can refer to in the TREB maps, it's comprised of a Clanton Park and further north of Clanton Park, the community of Bathurst Manor along Shepherd West Avenue. And along Shepherd, you have a lot of older, relatively speaking, 10 to 15 years, not 30 years. But older low rises to mid rises, which have spacious options. But further south of that, around Clanton Park, that is where the majority of the new development is, by Yorkdale Mall and Allen Road and the 401. What I saw with this area, with my personal business, buying and selling for buyers and sellers, I saw a lot of first-time home buyers or maybe more novice buyers go towards Clanton Park and Bathurst Manor. And in terms of proximity to transit and shops, Yorkdale Mall, C6 is a very, very good option. It's obviously on the western side. It's not central by, of course, Yonge and Bathurst standards, right? If you're Yonge and Shepherd, Yonge and Eglinton, Bayview and Shepherd, Bayview and Eglinton, downtown, a lot of major intersections downtown, you're more centrally located. But in the grand scheme of things, of course, C6 is still central. You are on the western side of the subway map for sure, close access to the TTC and all types of transit available to you. And once again, malls, more particularly when we look at Clanton Park. So it's really actually quite a fantastic area as a buy low option for a lot of first-time home buyers with regards to proximity to transit and convenience. It kind of lacks in terms of end user lifestyle, although it is close to Yorkdale Mall. Of course, that's really good. It's not a walking type of area, more particularly Clanton Park. Bathurst Manor is a little bit better in that regard. So some challenges these areas have is more so the end user lifestyle of just going for walks or bike rides potentially. And even after the 20% increase in average sold prices, it still remains central Toronto standards once again. It still remains one of the cheapest areas within the city of Toronto. Of course, at the price point of $640,000 in terms of average sold prices. Moving forward, the fourth area that increased the most in terms of sold prices for condominiums, according to the Toronto Condominium Market, is C14, seeing an increase of 21%, going from an average sold price year over year of $639,000 to January of 2022, $775,000. Now, one important note about C14, and you'll hear this again down the list, spoilers, is that it's within North York. And I know for avid watchers of this channel who watch every single video, this can be a little tiresome and redundant, but obviously I have to stay true to the numbers. And if the numbers indicate that I should keep talking about something, and so does my buying and selling, I'm going to keep talking about it. So apologies for the repetition, but as I have made very clear in recent videos, North York is potentially the hottest area right now in the city of Toronto, and that has actually continued into February. I made all the points clear as to why in one of my most recent videos, so feel free to watch that. So C14, of course, falls under North York, the eastern half of North York. The main areas of C14 are Willdale East and Newtonbrook East, along with some small portions of Bayview Village. And what you have, as I will repeat later down the list because it applies to the other areas I will discuss, is a very highly residential area in Willdale East, Newtonbrook West. Very highly residential. And what do I mean by that? A lot of detached houses, and detached houses of the higher price point variety, more so in Willdale East and Newtonbrook East. Newtonbrook East, you still have your older bungalows and side splits, and no doubt there's a lot of development occurring in Newtonbrook East. But in Willdale East, a lot of development has already occurred. And what we see with a lot of builders is, they're somewhat running out of side splits and bungalows in Willdale East, and they're migrating towards Newtonbrook East. The same kind of dynamic that I've discussed in the past with North Richville and South Richville, in Richmond Hill, of course. But nonetheless, you have $4 or $5 million properties in Willdale East. You have $3-4 million properties in Newtonbrook East. And as a result, the condominiums available in these areas see a positive effect, not only because these detached have an impact of kind of carrying up the property values for the good condominiums, of course. If you have just a very bad condo, it doesn't matter if around it are mansions. It's a very bad condo, the news will be on the market and prudent buyers will stay away. But as long as you have average to above average condominiums, they're going to see positive residual impact from a highly residential area, specifically at these higher price points. Furthermore, it makes it way more attractive for end users. And I'm going to use this opportunity to naturally segue to the next area on the list, because it's frankly the neighboring area at C7. Once again, the other half that makes up North York, where in the third item on this list, it saw so far number 4 and number 3 have been the heart of what most people consider North York. So the trend here, it should be quite clear to you. But continuing down the path of what I was talking about C14, what I stated with regards to C14 equally applies to C7, because C7 is even a more central version of C14, because C7, you have Yonge and Sheppard, you have Yonge and Finch, you have Willdale West, you have Newtonbrook West. And here the condominium market is actually far more ample in terms of the amount of buildings and inventory available. From Yonge and Sheppard to Yonge and Finch, you have 10 to 15 well-established and transacted buildings, right? Now, of course, of varying different degrees of quality, and each of them have their own negatives and positives. But nonetheless, as I've made mention in past and most recent videos, I frankly think Yonge and Sheppard area is, and of course this extends to Yonge and Finch, that stretch is much better in my professional opinion, and personal actually opinion as well, than Yonge and Eglinton. To put it differently, I think Yonge and Sheppard is what a lot of people think Yonge and Eglinton is. Of course, I will admit off the bat that I am in the minority on that regard, right? A lot of people, a lot of agents I know prefer the Yonge and Eglinton condo market and area, generally speaking. And it's by no means a bad area, right? I think it's pretty above average and it's pretty decent, but I think it's a little overrated. Nonetheless, I digress. C7 saw a 22% increase, going from $636,000 in average sold price to $780,000 in average sold price. Moving forward, we have the second area that has increased the most in average sold price year over year, which is the area of C3. Once again, refer to the maps if you don't know what that refers to, but I'll explain. It's comprised of mostly Forest Hill South, Humewood, Cedarville, Oakwood, Vaughan. So the western half of, Midtown, right? Along Eglinton West area and St. Clair West area. Going from an average sold price of $711,000 to an average sold price of $890,000. Now, off the bat, one thing I want to mention before I go into why this area has increased is that it's very limited transactions, right? So on both cases, January of 2021, January of 2020, doing the year over year comparison, when I went through the sales, limited amount of sales, far less than the other items on these lists, below 12 sales on both fronts. And when you have a smaller sample size, 1 to 2 sales can have an impact on the average sold prices. Nonetheless, that wasn't the case in this regard, because it's not as if in both regards there were 9 sales amongst ample inventory. 9 sales to 12 sales here is actually pretty on par with the amount of inventory available in this district, in this area. And frankly, the same thing I said about North York kind of applies here as well, in terms of it being a highly residential area. And I'm not going to make up new analysis for the sake of analysis. If it's the same through line, I'm going to obviously explicate it for you guys. But one thing that's distinct here is the Eglinton West LRT. I think that has had a highly positive impact, even the anticipation of which, it's obviously not completed as of now, but I think the anticipation of it, and of course it's closest along Eglinton to the condominium inventory, right? They are not in the residential streets, of course, they're once again on the major streets. And that's, Eglinton West and the LRT. But once again, one thing that's actually different from North York now here is that this area is mostly mid-rises. You don't have a lot of, if any, high-rises. The high-rises are closer to Yonge and Eglinton, right? Here we're obviously talking about Eglinton and Dufferin. That's for the west and where the high-rises are. And not to pat myself on the back, because I'm trying not to brag too much, but I am gonna contradict myself. I did predict this a year ago, just to be clear, along with North York. But anyways, I digress. Moving forward, the number one area that increased the most in average sold price within the city of Toronto in a year-over-year perspective is the municipality of C2, which saw a 72% increase in average sold prices year over year, going from $756,000 to $1.3 million in average sold price. And it's not as if, by the way, this is based upon a low amount of transactions. It's based upon a decent sample size relative to the area. Of course, it's not C1 or C8, so it's not going to be hundreds of transactions, but it was based upon 25 plus transactions in both months. And with C2, what you have is Wenchwood and Castle Loma and the Annex. Of course, the Yorkville condominiums are part of C2, and some of the most expensive condominium transactions that occur are within Yorkville, right? I'm not even referring to expensive with regards to $3-4 million. I'm talking about $10 million condominiums, $11 million condominiums. And one sale of a $10 million condominium can obviously carry up the average quite substantially. And although in this case, we did not have an example of a $10 million, $9 million property selling, although there is currently in this area a $10 million condominium penthouse on sale on the market, hasn't sold yet. Those tend to stay on the market for a long time. But we had more transactions towards the $3-4 million price range in January of 2022 that obviously carried up the average. Whereas in January of 2021, we did not have as many transactions above the $2 million price point. And we have to understand where January of 2021 was in the condo market. It was just off the bat of a historical low. It was entering into a seller-friendly market. It was coming out of November, December, the historical lows for the condominium market in terms of being a buyer-friendly buyer's market, but it still wasn't the heights of February, March, and 2 weeks into April that we saw that was going to come after this. It was kind of in a transitionary period within the condo market in Toronto. Now, of course, it's a very hot market, probably the hottest I've seen in a couple of years. But I've made that clear in my previous videos. Anyways, that is it for today's video, the 5 areas that grew the most in terms of average sold price. Feel free to get in touch with me with my contact information in the description box. Subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you.